You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. Welcome back, Slick Talkers, and man, do we have an episode packed for you. Nick, are you ready to jump in and give the listeners one hell of a story and one hell of a conversation?
Absolutely. That's why I'm here. Let's chat. Let's dig in.
Let's do it. Okay, so Nick, to give some context to the listeners, you and I actually got to meet in Boca Raton for the VRMA Executive Summit. Actually, I think I admitted this to you at Boca. Was that actually this was the first time I truly heard about SendSquared. So I would love to know, A, where did the business get started? And B, what's the mission and goal for the company today?
Great. Yeah, love the question. We started the company back in 2018. I had just left Le Monde, so it was another company I was running before this one. I was living down in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I was moving back to Minneapolis. And that's when I actually started the company. Actually, I was driving back and forth, believe it or not. So I was on the phone with my lawyer. I'm like, hey, let's get this going. But when I finally got back to Minneapolis is when I met my co-founder, Roy, and then eventually Nicole and a few others. And then, we actually got the business started at the very end of 2018. And then, first clients were, sometime like 6 to 12 months thereafter. You had to get the product up and going to some extent. And even still, it was far from where it is today. But yeah, we are a communications company. I like to call us maybe like, for those who are familiar with HubSpot, like we're the HubSpot of hospitality. We do a lot with communications. That's where we really center on. So phone calls, text messages, emails, those kind of pieces. We're designed particularly for the vacation rental industry. So that means we work with all the different PMS players. We connect, bring all the data across. But ultimately become, the source of truth for your communications. So call centers and those kind of components as well. So
I love it. So you're only sticking with the vacation rental industry, or is there a plan to go into the greater landscape of hospitality where you get hotels, potentially restaurants, any other kind of sectors you're looking at?
There is, but it's when we're ready. We do have some resorts and some hotels on the platform, but 80 some odd % of it is primarily vacation rentals. So, and that's the focal point, and it's not going to change in the short term. So,
yeah, I love it. I'm always curious because, as I was getting my company, I guess, started in 2021 officially as a network, I had Andrew Kitchell who's kind of telling me, he's like, find like that phrase, right? Like you said the HubSpot of hospitality, right? So like find a short, easy phrase. Like Andrew was like, say you're the Uber of blank, or you're the Airbnb. Like you can kind of use these things, right? And you create a core statement. And I went through that process. And I can't quite remember exactly what we said but anyways, it was a while ago. And with that, I always kind of wanted to, like, for you guys has the core statement of like the HubSpot of hospitality. The question I want to queue up for you guys is why would operators not use HubSpot rather than a custom product for their specific business, right? Like I'm curious.
Well, great question. And, first off, HubSpot doesn't connect to the PMSs natively. So, that's the first part we're going to click off for you. So, right. So we have direct relationships with each one of the different PMS providers out there. And so all that data is available for you readily as soon as you get connected. But yeah, and I love Andrew, good friends with him. I've known him before I actually got into the industry itself, and actually I'm still good friends with his old co-founder from Lyric, Joe, and I've known Joe for 15 years, which is just crazy how it all kind of came together. So, but yeah. So Control's a good guy. So
really good guy.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great answer, right? Like HubSpot doesn't connect to your PMS. Boom, there you go. That's how you get the data directly integrated. Seems like a simple solution, right? right?
Absolutely. I mean, in my eyes, but of course I'm biased. Yeah, I mean, there's other things too that we do that HubSpot's just not going to do right out of the gate. We are focused in on the call center tech, which is, in hospitality, it's still very important. You want people to
Mm.
be talking to people. We very strongly encourage that. So as you do have agents and all those kind of bits, that they're getting on the phone, with your potential guests, talking to people as they're coming in, especially when you get to the higher ADRs, makes a lot of sense. And those are areas where, again, we're going to really shine over anything else you'll find out there. So,
Well, you're the HubSpot of hospitality, but I actually kind of wanted to plan this out a little bit. So I'm going to throw a little curveball your way. And if you're
oh,
okay, I want to read a couple sentences slash paragraph or two from an article you wrote called Keep Pedaling. And it's talking about your
sure.
story of getting hit by a car while you're on a bike, not a motorcycle. For the
Correct.
listeners, just want to give you some context. And it's really powerful. Like, I found this article to be really moving. So I kind of want to, because I feel like your personal story will showcase a lot in this conversation as we kind of maybe share this context. So I'm going to pick off in a couple paragraphs in, but here's what it says for listeners. And I'll link this in the show notes. As the morning of my fatal bike ride, my life already felt like it had hit the skids. Greg and I had suffered a continuous falling out and parted ways from a challenging business venture. I sold my house and I moved my disappointed family back to the temporary rental home in Minnesota. I was busy scraping together plans for a new scrappy startup with a business partner I'd only barely knew. I felt a bit like a failed prodigal son, depressed, practically homeless, and effectively jobless. Only nobody was throwing me a party on my return. Now, the reason why I wanted to share that and like kind of set that stage is because one, I would love for you to take us back to that moment because I know when there's something so impactful in our lives, something changes. A light turns on, a fire lights underneath you, even though it didn't feel like it probably at that moment when you weren't feeling the strongest. I just know when we hit such a low, because I've hit a low before in my life, that it just creates such an ultimate high if you choose to act and change. So I'd love for you to take us in that moment and kind of like what was that process like for you? All right, Slick Talkers, sorry to interrupt. As you know, great partners at Minute have sponsored this episode. They sponsor the show. So every episode is filled with amazing minutes. No pun intended. So if you don't know who Minute is or what they do, we see that we have a lot of new slick talkers out there in the world. So one, thank you for tuning into the show. Every listen, every time you hit play means so much to me and to my team. So thank you. But if you are new, Minute is an amazing noise detection device. Not only do they measure noise decibel levels inside of your vacation homes or your hotels, they actually can detect smoke. Not only that, if you're an outdoor kind of a unique stay person or just have an amazing outdoor amenities for your guests from pools to hot tubs to cookout pads, all the stuff, they have an outdoor sensor that is specifically made for outdoor noise because I didn't know this, but noise outside and noise inside actually makes a difference. So you don't have to worry about constantly making sure, are people partying at your place? Are the cleaners there? Or like whatever, kind of issue might happen, you can get that peace of mind with Minute at your side. So as you grow, Minute will grow with you. They have an amazing team of support and they have an amazing technology from hardware and the software. When the two marry, it's just a beautiful combination. We use Minute in all of our vacation homes and hotels with our management company, and it's the best decision we've made because we are so dispersed and we are so spread out that having Minute just is a necessity for our operations. So get with Minute, go to the link in the show notes, let them know that Will from Slick Talk sent you. They'll give you a sweet deal. And of course, you know the drill. We're back to the episode, and I hope you enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, even as you're reading it, just kind of putting myself back there, living through those days. I mean, it's tough. I mean, there's just no other way to phrase it. I mean, I had two broken arms. It was a lot. I mean, I came from, when I was living that life, I mean, it was very grand. I have no other way to put it. I spent most of my days flying all over the world. So I'd be in Europe one week, I'd be in Australia the next. I mean, who can complain, right? And then, it wasn't that much longer afterward. It was probably less than 18 months. I found myself in that spot. It's tough. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the first day when you kind of wake up with it, I'm still a very driven human. So I'm like, hey, let's get back to it. But, you're trying to I mean, at any time, right? You're trying to create all those like types of calculations. What are you going to do if X, Y, and Z doesn't happen? If you don't get these kind of monies in place or these pieces don't hit, and obviously I think being naive is one of the biggest assets I had was just continuing to drive for it because it took a lot longer than I care to admit, to find success. But, really, truly, the people around you, right? I mean, that's where things really come to light. That's what makes the big change, right? I mean, money, fame, and all those things, it's like that's a portion I think a lot of people aspire for, but you don't recognize the people you have around you until you need to. I'm constantly surprised. And I don't mean to get emotional, but Roy, he does that. He constantly surprises me. And that's very much the team today. And it's I think to those who get in somewhat like that low, right? And you're trying to find your way out, you do need to take a look around you. Who's by you? Because the people that are by you at that point, those are the people that you're going to build with again. And if you got the wrong folks near you, you'll know. They won't be there for you. They won't be returning your call. They won't be helping you. It's a very, it's a natural process that they'll just take care of its selection on its own. But the people around you is what will help you through that period of your life, and you won't know it until you're there. But I'll tell you too, I mean, it'll change, the optics on what you actually want. What initially might be the initial goals that sets you up and makes you drive for something, those kind of incidences, when they happen in your life, it alters what you'll chase then thereafter. And for me, it's more of the connections and being, honest and trying to be authentic with myself and what I want, and those relationships, and because of it, candidly, my relationship with my kids and my wife and those around me have never been stronger. So navigating them is not an easy process. And I can tell you in so many different ways, when I had both of my arms broken and I just, the one thing I wanted to do the most, is probably just go outside, and just run or be free or just go ride my bike again, be honest. But you couldn't and you can't, I mean, I couldn't even drive a car, and it was, it was isolating, you felt trapped. And in a lot of ways, you weren't just physically trapped, you're also, in part like emotionally trapped as well, because everything changed. I mean, and then, lucky for me, I had surgery just before COVID hit. It was maybe a month or so right before, maybe 2 months before COVID hit. And so luckily I was able to get in and get out. I don't even know what life would have been like if it would have been after that. Like, I probably would have lost the motion and the range of my arm, which would have, hurt me now with the other activities that I do. Yeah, I'm still very athletic. I'm still very, I'm not going to give that up. Even I'm in my mid 40s, but those are just like, again, all those things, like they all changed. Like when I was in my early 30s, like physical fitness wasn't like the top piece that I was always after, and now it is. I mean, staying youthful and energetic, it's as important as almost anything else in my life. So, but those moments, they'll capture you, and they'll, I mean, it's like any other trauma, though. That time will almost freeze for you, and it's almost hard to, let go of that time. And so it stays still. It can. So I do love the story, and I do love how I've written about it. I do want to speak more about it because for those who are in that time and place, like I felt like when I was there, that I didn't have a lot of people to connect to and talk through, people who were going through that period of their time, of like their life. And so, like anything else, like mentors or anybody who can coach you through it. I mean, it can have a big impact. And I probably would have gotten through it a lot better had I had more folks in my life. But those that I did, I'm thankful for. Roy, Nicole entered my realm not shortly after, and even my family around me. That's really what's transformed even into, today for us. As a company, it's thick. It's part of the, you've almost part of the culture. So,
Well, you you said Roy specifically, and I can see you got emotional. Like you truly,
Yeah.
I could tell there's some still, some rawness to it. And I would love to know, you said Roy, he surprises you. And I would love to know what were some of the surprises that caught your attention in that moment of time that's so frozen, right? Like I could, because I'm getting like goosebumps just thinking about it, because I
Oh,
know
sure.
I know what that feels. I feel that and I relate and I'm like feeling it through the screen. So would love to know just like some moments that you remember that's caught by surprise.
Yeah. Well, I guess, to put it the best way, I've dealt with, probably abandonment my whole life, right? Raised by my father. My mother exited very young. I was only a few weeks old and she was gone. And so, it was something that I just circled with. And part of it made me a really good entrepreneur because I was always, I never would try to, rely on somebody else, emotionally, financially. So it created a lot of drive, which was, maybe like, maybe wrongly placed because as that is like a natural inertia for that, it wasn't being at the time, at least, years back, it wasn't, addressing those issues and that trauma. But, I always imagine, with all that, like all the different issues that were going on, that I guess Roy would just like pick up and leave. Right. And like, oh, well, it's not going to work out. You got hit by a car. Right. Like we can't do it. Or, now there's going to be, there's less money to put in the business.
Well, especially with you guys being like pretty new partners, right? Like
Oh,
you were
yeah.
fairly
Brand new.
strangers. Yeah.
Totally. Completely. Like
Yeah.
hardly, getting to know each other, we should be spending time like, adventuring and like creating more of like that, that bond, that brings us together. But, and it's interesting because that was part of the bond that we actually, like it was just, both very determined to get to where we want to go. Yeah. I guess, for me, that's why it's emotional is because I was always expecting, and even when times got tough, and even as they got tougher down the road, because we had to go through more challenges than just that, that was just where
Yeah.
we started. You're building a business together, and like any business, that business partner is it's a form of a marriage, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Like you get to know this person incredibly well, and you talk to them day in and day out. It's in some cases you might spend more time with them than you do with your spouse, and so of course with the issues that I had, I just would be like, God, like turning into like it was like it started as a train wreck. So like who would continue to show up? You know what I mean? So for me, it was just a multitude of like having to deal with some of that, like the emotion there, trying to get over that. Like, the abandonment issue is my issue, not Roy's issue. But seeing his strength and seeing he's also equally as determined as I am, I was like, who is this guy? I'm like, why am I meeting him now in my life? Where was he X years ago? And, and a lot of that as that the duvet had come and it set up, it was just, it was hard. It's hard for me to accept. Probably still is today, which is why it's emotional. But it's a good thing because it's a good balance. And you need that opposite person for you as you're running that business. And especially this business today. While and I are very, very similar, with backgrounds and being entrepreneurial and technical, I mean, we're also opposites, and there's a lot of balance there as well, which is phenomenal and has only continued to, better paint, the future we're continuing to see and execute on. So, and I guess a lot of that for me it was just foreshadowing, right? Like at that time, you're sitting here, you're going through that moment, and as that day happened, and I'll never forget it. It's just, and it was the most beautiful day. And it was just a fantastic fall day here in Minneapolis, and like the most pristine to go ride on, and of course to have all that happen, and to walk into the winter season, then of course all beat up and bruised while you're still trying to build and when you're trying to build an enterprise platform, I mean, it is years upon years of just building a piece of software for somebody who's not using it at all yet, like the people you're targeting, right? So, you gotta you gotta have that like long sight. You gotta have at least a vision in place, and it takes a lot. So, great questions though. You said you're going to read a
I'm
second part though. I'm curious what the
well,
second piece is.
I wanted to stay there. It was I could have kept going, but basically that paragraph summed
Okay.
up what I wanted to ask, which is setting a time of such a high to then such a low, and then this was just the cherry on top. And obviously, starting a business, new partner. I think what really caught me is, I think about multiple times on this show. I've talked to past guests about living your life based off of other people's expectations, finally coming into finding out who you truly are and what you're supposed to do when you felt so frustrated, getting over depression and suicide. There's so many topics that we've gone through, addiction, abandonment, you name it. And so for me, I always love when a guest on the show has some kind of story that isn't just, I went through high school, graduated, went to college, met my wife or met my husband, had kids, started the business, raised capital, got to Series C, da da da, and just like it feels so perfect. And
Yeah.
for
Well,
me, I like where that kind of paragraph and sentence kind of ended because it's not perfect.
no.
You have the self awareness to understand like you also had abandonment issues. So the moment that Roy comes to visit you in the hospital, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's just gonna leave. He's gonna say, all right, well, let's throw in the towel. Great to know you. Had fun. Good luck.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
you
was
I
not expecting him to show up. I mean,
yeah,
grateful. I mean, and it was a mix of emotion. And at the same time, too, I remember laying there and I remember as he's coming in, I was like changing things. I'm like, I was trying not to show myself because I'm like weak, like
yeah,
broken, like anybody, right? You're like, no, I'm going to be the fearless leader. We're going to go, we're going to get there. It's going to be amazing. This is what it's going to be like. And X, Y, and Z. And here's where we're going to hit here. And then of course, now you're walking into the hospital and like, you're seeing the guy that said all the same stuff. He's like, he's laying up there and he's like, so I'm like, no, I'm going to get checked out. I'll be great. I'll be in the office tomorrow, But of course, and I think I was, or maybe it was the day thereafter. I can't remember. I mean, it was quick. Everybody reminds me of that continually, especially those around my house, right? The kids and all that kind of stuff. They're always joking about it,
yeah,
but it's never perfect, and you're starting a business, it's like any other thing in your life. It's the marriage you're in, or it's like any other kind of partnership. They're all, it's all valleys and peaks, and it's, kind of rolling through those, right? I mean, it is this, and it's constant, and it's never, it's still today. It's different peaks and different valleys, right? The parameters change. I mean, we also had to go through equally, we took on investment money from folks, in 2021 when times were pretty crazy. And then we turned around, we bottom out this past fall, and those things aren't, easy either, right? And those create equal amount of challenges. And in each occasion, as I've, you know, been building and with Roy side and side, I've also watched him do the same thing. And as I thought, hey, here's the next set of challenges, here he is, he's just going to pack his bags and leave. And he never did, still doesn't. So, and again, the abandonment issue is my issue. It's not, I'm not projecting that onto Roy. He just happens to be the guy who surprises me time and time again. So, yeah, a ton of gratitude. And, that's why I'll share that any chance I get. And, I'm going to share it this year on LinkedIn itself, because I know probably the algorithm doesn't do its service well when it's linked out to, Medium to another spot. So hopefully, more people can help me celebrate Roy together.
100%. Shout out to Roy. You're the real MVP out here, Roy.
He is.
No, it's super incredible. I'm always kind of curious too, just from a, outside of what you kind of shared previously, your mom left and some other stuff. Like, what was your upbringing like? And I'm asking this to set you up for a second part, because now as you're a father, a husband, you've gone through this, you're an entrepreneur. Like, how are you trying to change the way you raise your kids and the way that you're even looking at parenting?
Totally. Those are great questions. And it is on the front of my mind too. Yeah. So, my mother left when I was really, really young, raised by my father. My grandparents played a significant role in that too when I got back up here to Minneapolis. And then of course I had a stepmother, a stepsister, and they're still here in Minneapolis. But, I mean, I didn't realize all of those issues until I was older, just like most
Yeah.
people do. My 20s, I kind of just like, buzzed through that, ignored it all. you know, got into my early 30s, was like, maybe there's something here. I should talk about it. It took me a while to,
That
find
was
somebody.
me in my teens, and then my 20s was like, shit, I really should address this stuff.
Right. So, and
Got kind of crazy.
yeah. And so it was
Yeah.
that. And then I had kids when I was in my late 20s, kind of a young guy still. When my son was born, I was 27. And I was very well established at the time, but of course,
Yeah.
she got pregnant out of wedlock. And so, of course, we had to figure all
Yeah.
that out, eventually married. And, that's a whole story in itself, which is great, by the way. And then, it is can capture an audience. But, as my kids got older, my oldest now is 15, it's altered everything. When I got old enough and I was like 18, 19, I was like, hey, get out. And I got on my own. And I was very independent, right? And a lot of that was driven by some part of those abandonment issues. But
Mhm.
as I look now for my kids, I don't want to create that massive separation. I want to be there to, that continue to help them even throughout life. And, I think, society's maybe normed that as maybe like spoiling. And I mean, of course, I don't want to spoil my children, but at the same time too, I don't want them to feel like, hey, like you're on your own, right? So I want them to know that there's somebody there. And I think, when you get into business and you start making all these different changes, and it's like, for us, people ask me all the time too. For us, we're designing the business, so that we can live with it. It's more of like a lifestyle type of business. It's not,
Yeah.
when you get investors, and that was probably some of the issues is, you get investors are like, okay, well, liquidation, when are we going to return? Or when are you going to recap? Or when are you going to invest or get more in? And so, for us, it's just, everything was a little bit different. Right. And so optically, that's why, for us and the way we would likely do that, it just didn't make a lot of sense. We're looking at it, 10, 15, 20 years, not 2 to 5. Right.
Yeah.
And VCs, they want to know what's the game plan within 2 to 5. And, when you're designing these things, and this is any business, it doesn't matter if you're a property manager or you're a software entrepreneur, but, what might be different from the property managers to the software entrepreneurs is that the software entrepreneurs, it's very popular to go out and raise capital, right? Like that's generally the topic. I mean, speaking of Andrew Kitchell, like he's lived and
Yeah.
breathed that life. Like he's the man. Like he knows all those folks too, right?
100%.
And that's a path. But for us, it probably wasn't the right path. And that's not to say that'll always be the case. But I mean, for us right now, that's how we're looking. We're looking at that optically, 10 or so plus years. And so you kind of, you dial all that back and you go, hey, what are you doing also with your kids? I mean, it's in the same light. The kids aren't just going to go to college and be like, okay, we'll see you later. Like
Mhm.
maybe we'll see you a couple times a year thereafter. Then you're just like, you count down the times you're going to see them in the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That's not what I want. I want to I want to be a part of their lives. I want to be, there for them when they need different things. And God forbid something bad happens to them. Hopefully I'm within the first, 4 or 5 people they want to call and talk to and, rely on for help. So, at least that's what I aspire for.
Yeah. You said your son's 15. Do you guys talk about any of this stuff one on
Yeah,
one?
no, sure. Yeah. So my oldest is 15. My daughter is turning 11 this year. And then I'm a 6-year-old. But yeah, my oldest and I, we ride bikes. We go to the gym, we work out together, so we get a lot of time to talk and chat. Those are things I never did, with my
Yeah.
father. And I'm not
Same.
saying, it was wrong, but of course I would have loved that, to go and work out. And, but yeah, no, I mean, I try to be very involved in their lives. I mean, I drop the kids off at school every day, right? I mean, that's stuff that I won't stop, I won't make any sacrifices from that. So I'm very proud about that. And it's a very exciting, period of the day for me, believe it or not. It's like, hey, I'm going to go drop the kids off, right? It's fun.
Yeah.
And I got to go hang out at a coffee shop and it's whatever. I mean, but it's part of the fun of it. Right. And so it's, because I don't have a 9 to 5, right? I'm not working for somebody else. And so I don't have to show up at somebody's office, and which is brilliant because then I can spend more time with them, which is like, that's the real purpose of it, right? Like, the people, you'll start a business and you're like, oh, well, because I want the yacht or I want all the extra homes. And sure, those are things to aspire for, but if you can't share it with somebody, what's the point? Right. So, optically it all changes, right? So, and that's my calling. I guess if you never heard me say it, some people have jobs, other people aspire for careers, some people have a calling, and this certainly is mine.
I have two questions for you. First one, what's one thing about your relationship with your kids that you think that they'll appreciate that you didn't get to experience? Like they'll appreciate it more because they know you didn't get that and that you gave it to them.
I think an authentic relationship with both parents. I mean, that's the thing I always wanted, right? I was desperate for a mother when I was a child,
Mhm.
right? I called so many other people mom, and people looking back, I had several of them. My grandmother, different women in my life growing up, which made even, dating for me as a young man difficult, because of course, it's just another Achilles heel for me to have to try to jump through those emotions. So, I would hope that would be one of them. I mean, it's certainly something that I work towards. Yeah, I mean, that would probably be, if I had to make it the most, I mean, it'd certainly be the most important because, ensuring that, you know, the kids get to know both of us thoroughly so they understand, lineage, where they came from, why they do certain things, and, they don't draw question marks and, try not to, every parent, they want, to do better for their own children than they had, right?
Mm.
And so, looking at my life now, which might differ in 10 or 20 years, but my biggest Achilles heel was always that I was incredibly insecure that I didn't have a solid relationship with my mother. So,
Mm. All right, I'm back. Sorry to interrupt, but you have to hear about our partners and friends at Hostfully. Not only are they an amazing property management software, they're an amazing team. I've been friends and partners with Hostfully for over 4 years now, and it's been an amazing 4 years. I can't complain because as I continue to grow my business with our property management company, they continue to update and grow their products and features within the Hostfully platform, and it just gets better over time. So, with us, we have a unified inbox, we have amazing marketplace, not only for the rest of our tech stack to integrate, which is awesome because I work with so many people, but then the third piece is the distribution is built in. So you don't have to fully rely on a channel manager. You can actually rely on the amazing integrations that Hostfully has with Airbnb, Verbo, Booking.com, Marriott, Homes and Villas, you name it. They have what you need in order to get your inventory, your properties to the right people. It's kind of a no-brainer, but I'm going to tell you this anyways. You're going to get a special deal with Hostfully with the link in the show notes. You'll just have to let them know if you love the product and then just tell them that we'll send you. So that way you can get that amazing Slick Talk deal. And of course, we're back to the episode. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy. The second question goes into your calling. And I love how you said that, some people strive to get a job, some strive for a career. I want my calling and this is it.
mhm.
And so kind of explain to me the calling. What does that calling mean to you? What is it like if you could name that calling in a sentence? What's that sentence?
Phew, well, that's a lot.
Sentences can have commas, which allow you to
Yeah,
continue on
well,
and
I
stuff.
mean, I
So
never try to condense it. So, I mean, I know I use the phrase, and those aren't my words. I think I got that from somebody else, to be candid. And I don't quite know who. Yeah, and I think it's because it's a lot of folks. It's when you're looking at it. Some people are just good with a job, right? That's all they want. Careers, and some people do. They do it. They aspire for a beautiful, amazing career, VP of sales, VP of engineering, or whatever it is, and they're constantly. This is like their wheelhouse, right? No pun intended, Andrew. But yeah, I think a calling. I mean, I think callings aren't things that you decide. I think those are things that are decided for you personally.
mm,
I thought, 10 years ago would have been all the things I was doing with Greg,
yeah.
and helping him launch his businesses and uh, getting back on the world stage and all that kind of stuff. That was very much, I would have probably said that was the case. Today, it wouldn't be obviously it would not be that. It would be leading this path forward. I think we have a lot to do in this industry. We have a lot of lives to touch and change, and that's what it is. I mean, it's not just, sure, there's reservations and there's all those things and there's PMSs, but it's truly, it's about the guests, right? And it's about those experiences and it's about making memories and it's about, helping, countless of families to connect on those special moments that they get throughout the year. and ultimately at the end of the day, we're a communications company. So we're a big piece of that. Right.
Mm.
And I think it definitely is, but I don't think a calling is something you sit on the couch and, ponder it's what it's going to be. And you're like, that's
Yeah.
it. I think it's something that you just wake up with one day and you realize that you've been now doing it for some time and, and you're still trying to learn about it. And I think what you do is, when you finally, like the first thing is admit it, right? Like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, this is it. And then you try to, you try not to screw it up, right? You try to do your best to be, be the best, trying to find the right word for it, but to be the best provider of it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, now it's on your shoulders of whatever it is that your calling might be. And I think, when it's there, you're just like, hey, how do I not screw it up for everybody else who's counting on you? And so that's tough, and it's a lot to think about. And it's, if you ponder on it too much, sure, you'll get hung up in it. But I think it's like, it's anything else, right? I mean, and those who do operate and run, larger businesses, sometimes for them, it's just, it could be just a career, if you're just hired in as, like the hired gun for, a CEO or whatever that might be. And that is just kind of like a career, but it's when you go and you create something, right? And then it's like, you do start to touch all these lives, and I think that's where it starts to just come together for you. It's hard though, like I said, how do you condense that into a sentence? How do you condense
Yeah.
that into a few words? It's a lot,
Hey,
but it
I
is. It's
yeah.
if you can't connect to the emotion though, and if you can't connect to the people who you're touching, I think you are about to take it off the rails, right? And if you can't recognize that and then the vision's lost, right? And that's the special
Mhm.
thing about it, right? And that's why I think when people get excited about, a company, they're not excited about the money they might make and all that kind of stuff. They're excited about how their lives might transform, right? That's what they're like when they get to join or if they get to, sign up for the product, right? I mean, I remember looking back like in the early Oz and first getting like my first invite to Gmail, right? And it was like 2004, 2005. Forgive me if I got the year wrong. For those fact checking, but I remember getting the invite and I was like, oh my God. And I got in. I was like, oh, this is great. And of course at the time I was using things like Yahoo or whatever it was out there, right? And I was like, oh, this is so awesome. And being a tech guy myself, I was like, oh yeah, Ajax, it's sweet. It's just like updating, it's not refreshing the page, and you felt this like you had like a special bond, right? And then, you know, you would just be like this constant cheerleader for anything, Google related at that time. And I think again, those guys, they fell into their calling, right? And yeah, they built it all out of Stanford and all that kind of stuff, and then eventually dwarfed all their funding and the rest of their story. But it's a lot of the same for any of us who are out as an entrepreneur. And I think it's just hard to recognize it one day, right? And then recognize that when you do, that your goals are going to dramatically change too, because now it's not about having the big war chest of cash or the massive yacht down in the Bahamas, because who wants to be on the yacht all alone, right? So I mean, what's the point if you're just down there?
That's good.
Well, okay,
I'm
you
just
know,
joking. I'm just joking.
no, no, that's good, it's good. But it's like I mean, things change, right?
Yeah.
And you either learn how to change with it, or you'll get frozen in the past, and then
Mhm.
that's where I say, a lot of those things will just, you'll lose them. But yeah, calling's hard.
Well, a lot of the listeners are entrepreneurs of the show, or a lot of the listeners of the show are entrepreneurs, whether they're in a hotel, short-term rental, tech, doesn't really matter. We cover a lot of sectors. And, I think there's, some people may not agree listening, right? Like, all right, I don't have a calling. I have a business idea. I just wanted
Sure.
to, change wealth, change the name of my family name or whatever it is. But then there's a lot of us who are very passionate, very emotionally intelligent, driven, based off of passion and a good idea and the love of relationships and people. So when it comes to calling, it can be sometimes quite a heavy, I wouldn't call it burden, but sometimes it feels like a burden. And the reason why I say that is like when I was 7, my mom's like, you are called to be a pastor of a church. That's your calling. And that was a hard calling to live up to growing up, especially now that I'm not doing it. preaching a different message and word to a different, congregation. But, I think the calling piece can be sometimes so heavy, especially when you're not feeling on it, right? Like you're not feeling on track and you're like, I know this is my calling, but today it's just not that day. What's your advice for kind of making sure that you keep that North Star, that yes, maybe you're changing, but your calling can stay the same? What are your thoughts?
I think everybody deals with imposter syndrome. It doesn't matter where you're at on the path. I think you always are going to deal with that. It's just because there was a time in your life where you weren't there, right? And so you don't feel worthy of being able to execute at the level to maybe the people you aspire to, right? But I think you have to know that. But at the same time, too, that doesn't mean you just like that's a crutch either, right? I think for anybody, it's you also have to step it up and and work towards that as well. So I mean, but I think that's where I would always say, what I always think of in the morning is like, next day, try not to screw it up. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, right? There's going to be a lot of bruises along the way. You're going to make a lot of mistakes, but you just have to remind yourself that that's everything you do in life, right? And, is the age old, analogy, you fall off your bike, you get some bumps, you get back on it again, right? I mean, it's a part of the path. I couldn't imagine being 7 and being said I needed to be a pastor though. So for me, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes and I just, that's heavy, that's a lot, you know,
Yeah. It
I
clicked a
still,
lot later in life, but, I heard it
yeah,
growing up, and then when,
sure.
teenage years hit, you're like, "Okay, I get it."
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
it is a lot. Unless perhaps you're just more natural speaking in front of folks. But for me, I would have been, I would have just anxious to all to be, and I mean, I can only imagine all the different emotions I'd go through before getting up and then having to speak intelligently to a group of folks about religion or anything else for that matter. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, look, I mean, I think for anybody, imposter syndrome is real, and that's not going to go away. But at the same time, too, what you do have is you do have your wits. You do have like you did get there naturally, in some
Mhm.
way or another. Either you're hired in for it, like the hired gun, or you built it, you got it to that scale. So, you did earn it. And you will need to remind yourself of that. And you do need to dig down deep in and go and say, you know what, I do have the tools to execute and confirm this. Some humility and some self-awareness won't hurt, right? Along with some empathy. Like those are all great things and it's very relatable. And it certainly is a way for somebody else to, help you out. And it's a great way to open a door. But I would say that, I think everybody has it. I mean, even I have it. Everybody does. And if they say they don't, I would not believe them at all. So, but
I'm curious because I believe a lot of times, especially from a founder's perspective, maybe not so much from like a CEO or like a hired gun perspective, but for a lot of the times, I believe, when a founder creates a company and puts that out, they had an idea and they put it into the real world, it does reflect a lot about them, who they are currently at that moment, who they were in the past, and potentially what they aspire to be. Would love to know what part of you do you think reflects through SendSquared?
man, yeah, you are throwing me some curveballs. Was not prepared for that one either. I don't know. I mean, hopefully, the empathy comes across. We would like to see that, be a part of its who we are, but also communication. I mean, the communication in itself, right? I mean, there's a lot that goes through with different emotions in communications. So being able to communicate really well just that's a good skill, right? But I think, and it's something that I think I've had a fairly good skill of through most of my life. I wouldn't have been able to do half the things I've been able to do. So without being able to communicate them effectively, right? I mean, I remember, and not a lot of folks know this, but I negotiated a deal with Deakin University out in Australia, and like they had all the politics lined up with it. I mean, and like the state of Victoria, it was all down there. I met the prime minister was, I mean, it was a lot of communicating, but so I'd like to think like that part echoes probably hopefully the strongest, but I think some of the other pieces too, I mean, something like my emotional, you know, self-awareness, those connection points. how I do always see everything as a circle. I love that, even though we have a square in our name. you know,
I was gonna
yeah,
say,
but I always like to think things work in circles, right? It's just like what's old is new again. It always comes back and around. Like you can't escape it, right? And so and I think so many things in life are like that. We are a square, and if you get into the nerdy bit of us, we'll tell you why we think we're squarish, because we are a bunch of squares.
please,
You know,
please tell me why.
oh, just
Can you
the
please
nerdiness.
give us some context?
Yeah, well, I mean, like we're very geeky. We're very product focused. One, you'll get to know as you'll see more of SendSquared. It is. It's very, we focus on the technicalities. We focus on being strong there. We're not a sales machine where we just sell, 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 and then don't follow up with the product. We're the opposite. So, we have a very strong product, and we're still trying to figure out how to best build the sales team and the sales engine to get it out there, which is a big piece of it too. So it's not like
Yeah.
it's absent, but when we look at you look at myself, look at Roy, even look at Nicole, everybody's very
Mhm.
has a lot of technical abilities behind them. So, it's a strong portion of our personas, which is why I was regarding all those squares. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think, and that's also a piece of it as well, right? The company itself, we are technically founded, right? Like I have a very strong technical past. Roy has a very strong technical past. We take that as and we're a telecommunications company, right? And we are an FCC regulated telecom. We can't be down at all. Like what happened,
Mhm. With
last
Microsoft
Friday.
and
Yeah, like all
cyber
that.
fire link,
And
whatever.
we weren't down then, but and of course we can't be. We're routing phone calls. We're
Yeah.
we're sending critical communications. Text messages. Emails. Even though there could be more time delay on an email, but yeah, I think a lot of that echoes through, and I think you're right to point out that founders will often do that. Hired guns. It's just because optically it's all different for him, right? The hired gun comes
Yeah,
in.
it's
He's
very metric based, right? It's kind
Mhm.
of very, all right, performance metric versus founder. It's the suffering the details. Sam Shank had him on and talked about just suffering in the details with Hotel
Oh
Tonight
yeah.
and just like all that stuff and suffering in not just suffering in the details, but being so passionate about the product. Like every single thing matters. Every service communication matters.
Oh yeah.
The way you have relationships with your vendors matter. Like everything is just so crucial. Yeah. Yeah.
You're absolutely right, and I deal with it as well. Actually, my friend Rebecca Lombardo, I think you were there when we met. She
Mhm.
was there when we met. I used to joke about, ever seen the Avatar skit with Ryan Gosling from, I think it's from SNL, and she's
Yeah.
like all obsessed about the font. And it's very relatable for a founder because you obsess over just the things that nobody else will look at or see, and like
Yeah.
for him, it was like they put the font in very basically, like just
Yeah.
bolded it or whatever it was. But yeah, look, I would agree. Like, and you can get paralyzed in like the details, and the whole world will just escape and walk away on you, and you'll be still stuck there looking at this something that may not even matter. So,
I love it.
but
Well, I know you had a time crunch for today, and I don't
do
wanna keep you over, but I have a question that I pulled from our Diary of a CEO deck of cards of famous questions asked on that podcast. If you're not familiar with it, you should definitely watch it.
not
It's a great show.
should.
Brian Chesky had a great episode on there. Anyways, I'll digress. The last question I wanna leave you with here, Nick, is this: what is something that people value that you no longer value?
God, you are putting me on the spot again. Yeah, I would call it, abundant, excuse me, abundant fiscal wealth, right? I no longer chase that. Having the piles of money. It's not. I mean, sure, it'd be great. It's definitely something. I don't even know if it did happen what I wanted. I don't know if I would have to go with that. I just maybe just based on our conversation with
Yeah.
today and where everything went and where you drove me right back to my beginning with my abandonment issues and all those kind of pieces, right? Back up through the car accident with the bike. So yeah, I would probably land it on that. I mean,
I
a lot of
lied. I have
folks.
one more question.
Okay.
You said
Go.
you're not chasing that. So what are you chasing then? What's the chase? What gives you drive? to continue to chase whatever that goal is?
I want to continue to affect other people's lives. I want to continue to help connect families, people, connections. I think vacations, they're so romanticized, and I love it because even I'll do it when I go on runs. Um, so I think that whole, kind of being able to pull that all together, that's a beautiful thing, right? And so, the more people I can touch with those communications, whether it be about a trip that they've dreamt of their whole life to go to a place they've never been, or just spend it with that special someone, or reconnect with their children, and everybody goes through different stages of their lives. You get older and like, yeah, all you want to do is see your kid that's fully grown again, right? Maybe it's like that big Christmas end of year celebration. And it's like being able to be a part of that in any degree, I think is truly something to aspire for. So
Love it. So Nick, I think we barely have covered SendSquared outside of the, HubSpot of hospitality. So one, I want to thank you for, being okay
of
with the
course,
route of conversation and going
always
more personal than
love it.
business.
Always.
B, where can people go to find you? Obviously, everyone knows I link everything in the show notes, so there will be your website, your LinkedIn, all the stuff in there. But like, what's the number one spot if you were going to have a listener that wanted to reach out to you? Go.
Yeah, I mean, drop me a line on an email, Nick, N-I-C, at SendSquared.com. You can find me on LinkedIn too, pretty easy to connect with out there. Drop me a note, DM, I'll read it. But yeah, otherwise, find me on my website, all that kind of stuff. So
Love it. Well, Nick, thank you so much. Seriously, I've enjoyed it. To have a more emotional, in a good way,
of course,
conversation that's more personal is very refreshing. It's a great way for, I think, people to see that kind of just like a message to the listeners, mostly on this. But I feel like a lot of times when, especially you and I, you've got to see it, right? Like when you go to the conference setting, it's just crazy, right? And everyone's talking business and all these ideas and all this stuff. And yes, there's friendship and relationships there. But I think a lot of the time, especially when I meet listeners in real life, it's, I love this guest. They had so much knowledge. Are you able to intro or can you do this? And keep like, it's a lot of business stuff. And I love the moment to be able to showcase the true people behind a lot of these companies, a lot of these products, behind our personal stories, just being able to chat as two guys and get
sure.
emotional and talk about our childhoods and just to actually do something a little different. So thank you for the listeners who are, also participating across this journey of the episode. I think it's really important for me. I want to do more of this kind of conversations, So I just want to say, yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Well, of course. Thank you, Will. Appreciate being on it.
All right, Slick Talkers, you know what to do. Like and subscribe, all things SendSquared. Make sure Nick feels all the love from the Slick Talk community. And of course, you know what to do. Like always, we'll see you guys again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.